Story originally chronicled by Nuala Curien, collected by seer Alexandria Curien, and expanded by Witsili Nikali. When news reached Greta Curien about her husband's death, she fell into a deep sadness. She was already pregnant for 2 months when they got the news of Angus's death, and she was still pregnant when she knew of her husband's death. She had 2 children to watch, Nuala and Daniel, and now she had another child to worry about. Still, Greta was experienced in managing the estate, like she had been doing for decades by this point. Still, she became more and more withdrawn, quietly filling out letters, handing them to her daughter, Nuala, along with requests while she was rarely seen by her living family. Occasionally, Greta would walk out on the widow's walk at night, looking into the wood, longing for her husband. Some say she even called out for his name, but I never saw her mention her husband's name after his death. Though it's difficult to know for sure when she barely mentions your own name, her concerns seem to be running the estate and her new baby. As quiet as it was in the home, I was hopeful that she would get better after the baby was born. Daniel was hopeful as well. We had the staff, but no friends left, and we were worried that Greta was now the haunted one. I was just a few years from being betrothed, and I was hoping to move far from the Curien estate, leaving the ghosts and my melancholy behind. I now realize how foolish it was for me to hope that things were going to get better. The world is full of hardships, challenges, and dangers. Few are solved by letting them push you around. Even if you are on a stormy sea, even though you are powerless to stop the storm, you don't sit down and hope the storm passes. You still have to tie yourself down, you still have to steer your ship, and you still have to pray that Lear doesn't let his son drown you. Even after all these years later, I wonder if there was someone I should have prayed to keep this tragedy from happening. Greta went into labor a full month before her expected due date. Late in the night, beneath a black moon, Greta howled as she gave birth, in a home that was empty save for herself. I was out handling business in the village with my brother. The staff were gone with us, our mother demanding to be left alone that night before she gave birth. I am unsure if her contractions began before she demanded to be left alone and she wanted to give birth alone, or if she didn't feel her contractions until she was alone, and she spent her labor wishing she wasn't alone. What I do know is the next day when I came back home, I found my mother half bled out, covered in clotted blood and other gross, half-dried body fluids. In her arms was a swaddled blanket. In the blanket, I could hear crying as she held the infant close to her chest. Exhausted and drained, she slept through the cries of the baby as I opened the blanket to see my young sibling. They were smaller than I expected. Their body blue, with bones that seemed to be bent out of shape. Her chest was still, their flesh was ice cold, and I could see bruisings on the bottom of the feet and back where gravity pulled the blood closer to the ground. The haunting part? The baby's cries continued, even with the eyes milky, the mouth still, and the flesh putrid. The baby had no breath, but screamed. The baby had no heartbeat, but panicked. The baby lived no life, but lingered. Even when I took the baby out of my mother's arms, she did not wake. I had to call for aid, and she had to be taken far to the hospital. She wouldn't wake, even when she was taken away by carriage. I had to arrange for the burial of the baby myself. The entire time, the baby wouldn't stop crying. The priest of the local Christian church refused to enter the household, stating he could hear the demonic cries even outside, and he would not bury the unbaptized baby on holy ground. He also said he would not be anywhere near the demonic baby. We sent word to an exorcist who claimed to be an expert at putting such foul spirits to sleep. The exorcist came. His words only made the baby cry louder, and we couldn't stop the screams. After 3 days of prayer, holy water, and incantation, the screams got loud enough that it could be heard from the village. Any pregnant women who heard the cries either miscarried or gave stillbirth, depending on how far along they were. Their own babies born with twisted limbs, external hearts, and born screaming with no breath. Their spirits lingered like the spectral stillborn. The villagers feared getting close to the Curien estate, not just because of the screaming infant, but with other ghosts as well. So while my mother recovered in the hospital, still unresponsive, still unconscious, I had to find a way to get the infant to stop screaming. I couldn't bury the beast. I tried. And even surrounded by soft soil, the screams continued, and barely muffled by the dirt. Even when I dug 2 meters deep into the ground, the screams were too loud. And after a night of trying to sleep with those cries, I dug up the stillborn. By that point, the body continued to rot like all bodies do. It grew loaded. It was disgusting, constantly leaking fluids, including the sour scent of stomach acid digesting the inside of the body, as it leaked through cuts and bruises alike. The dirt only made it worse. It looked like it crawled out of the grave. The smell of petrichor and fresh earth lingered with the smell of rotten death. I used to love the scent of petrichor. The smell of rain was once so cleansing, like the world was given a fresh chance. Ever since I saw that gruesome ghoul, the scent of petrichor only makes me ill because it reminds me of that twisted face. The teeth, so many teeth peeking out from the torn gums. The dried tongue crawling with bugs and eggs. The eyes like popped grapes with worms and maggots crawling inside. The ice-cold skin that squirmed and had something crawling inside of it. The tiny bones and muscles that snapped whenever I moved the body, even a little. The bundle was like a pack of foul-smelling twigs that always snapped so easily, and I couldn't make it stop. If you're wondering why I was holding that foul corpse, it was because it was the only thing that would quiet the baby's cries, even for a while, was to hold the infant in my arms. The staff refused, even when I threatened, even when I bribed, even when I begged, even when I pleaded, even when I cried. They refused. It was just me and my brother. I was only 16. I couldn't carry it alone. I couldn't be the only one to carry the infant. I I couldn't be the only one. I couldn't. I had to sleep. I had to eat. I had to work. I needed silence. The baby wouldn't stop crying unless someone held it. Daniel was younger than I was. He had to carry it. I had to make sure I had a break. It wasn't my fault what I had to do. I needed a break from the torture. Daniel's bruises will heal. I I don't think I hit his head that hard. He was still breathing when I brought him to the basement. Even if he sleeps, he can hold the infant, even if the hands have to be chained up. He woke up after a few days. His crying in the basement is so much quieter than the infant's. He smells, but he smells so much less than the baby. The baby doesn't care if the one who holds it is chained up or chained to the infant. The baby just needed to be held. He'll be okay. He'll be okay. He'll be okay. He has water in the basement, and he doesn't need to eat every day. He'll just be hungry for a few days. I can't face that infant, and I can't let the screams reach the village. Not again. The babies die when the baby cries, and the dead infants cry along with the stillborn. It took many days, but I found a druid. She told me what we needed to do. I let Daniel out of the basement. I held the infant while he got cleaned up, and he got some food, dressing up in clothes that covered the bruises, and the hat to hide his black eye. The staff weren't eager to hold the infant. They were eager to make sure that Daniel would hold the infant. The druid lit the candles outside in a circle, leaving 2 bowls inside of the circle, and had us place the infant inside of the circle. Her daughter, Alexandra, watched from afar, a seer like her mother. As the infant was placed inside the circle of candles, the druid had us collect stones while she prepped the body. While in the circle, the druid placed 13 copper coins in the first copper bowl, the coins for the baby to carry into the afterlife, to spend, or to keep. However, the baby's soul wanted to do with them in the afterlife. Then, in the other bowl, the druid placed food, a slice of bread, still warm, with butter and honey over it, a luxury that the baby never got to taste, but would fill the soul's stomach as they traveled into Otherworld. Then finally, the druid picked up an iron knife, one nearly as large as the stillborn itself, and placed it on the chest, a weapon and tool for the baby to protect itself from both fae and ghost alike. Something to arrive in Otherworld with, along with the food and coin. As Nuala and Daniel piled the stones they found near the circle, the druid leaned closer to the infant's head. She whispered stories to the infant, stories of what would wait for the infant in Otherworld. Tales of the gods, tales of the heroes, tales of the peace, tales of the adventures, tales of the treasures, tales of the joys. The druid told the baby how to make it further west than the sun could set. She told the baby how it would cross the sea to reach Otherworld. She told the baby how its ancestors, its family, were in Otherworld, how it would be able to move on without regret. Its family would follow along to Otherworld in their own time, and that there was no need to cry, that all of its needs and wants would be met in Otherworld, that in Otherworld the baby could be a hero, a poet, anything it wanted to be. It just needed to move on. When Nuala and Daniel had enough stones, they were told to carefully place the stones over the corpse, to bury the dead in stone, leaving no space for the dead to be exposed to the air. The stones carefully placed over the body, leaving the body above the ground, but covered in stone. Then the stones were covered in dirt, while the druid blessed the body, stones, and the dirt with her fae, a consecrated stick that allowed her to bless the body. The baby, now finally buried and the candles blown out, the sun came up on the Curien estate, and the druid warned Nuala and Daniel that the baby's name could never be spoken again, and if its name was ever spoken or written, the baby may see it as an invitation back to the soulful lands, and may wander back from Otherworld, and it wouldn't be so easy to get rid of the second time. Hence why even in retelling, and even in writing, the baby's name is never spoken. Even though Greta loved her son long before he was ever born, and his name was a rare moment of happiness after her husband's death, that name was never again spoken in the Curien estate. Even when Greta woke up the same day that her stillborn was buried, she never spoke the infant's name. Even when the lives and deaths of the Curiens were cataloged by historians, the name was never recorded. Even though the stillborn Stillborn's haunting was a lot shorter than a lot of the Curien's ghosts. It was one of the deadliest. Over 3 dozen dead infants were directly connected to the screams of the spectral stillborn, but there have been echoes throughout the years. Sometimes in the village, people get curious and try to find or figure out the spectral stillborn's true name. Most fail. Most. A few get very unlucky and they call out the infant's name, or worse, they write it down and they find there's only one way to make it stop crying. In one case, during the summer of 2733, the young teen Shaban Byrne was asked to watch her young brother, the 10-month-old Peter Byrne. Her boyfriend was visiting, without her parents' knowledge. They started telling scary legends and stories. When they discussed the legend of the spectral stillborn, they began to guess on what they thought the name of the infant could be. Shaban made the mistake of writing down the names on a piece of paper, and when she stumbled upon the name, Shaban heard the cries of the spectral stillborn. Thinking it was her brother's cries, she ran to where her brother slept, only to see him sleeping comfortably. Shaban ran back to her boyfriend, who could now hear the screaming because he read the name on the paper. Considering the fact it was the 2730s, the idea of things like mental health or seeking help for mental illness was something that didn't occur to them. They feared they would be locked away if they told anyone that they could hear crying that no one else could. So they tried ignoring the baby's cries. It only grew louder, piercing into their heads, louder than the television, even when it was turned up to maximum. They tried covering their ears. None of it lessened the spectral stillborn screams. According to notes written by Shaban, they had been stuck listening to the screams for hours or even days. They tried calling for help, but they could only hear the baby's cries on the phone. They tried leaving the house to run towards a neighbor's house. The paths would only lead back to the house. All roads, all paths, all trails were haunted by the same screams, by the fact that there was no way out of the haunting. According to the notes, Shaban's boyfriend deafened himself by shoving scissors into his ears. And even with blood and ruined tissue cascading down his face, unable to stand up because he could only feel spinning, he still heard the infant's cries, only louder now because there was no other sound that could be heard. He bled out over several hours, Shaban not noticing that her boyfriend was dead. She was too focused on her own haunting to worry about him, and across the hour, Shaban became convinced that she could hear the words in the screams. Words that told her the only way to get rid of the curse. She argued, she pleaded, she begged. But the screams continued. It was there. Days without sleep, without reprieve from the spectral stillborn screams, that Shaban finally listened to the words behind the screams. When her parents returned, they found her cradling her smothered brother. The only thing she would say as she was taken away was that the screams finally stopped. It is believed that over 400 counts of infanticide and over 500 counts of suicide over the last 100 years were caused by the spectral stillborn screams.